You've tuned in to Stranger Than Fiction News, broadcasting live from the dark side of the planet. A monstrous 100-foot fissure has sparked an urgent park closing at Yellowstone National Park. And this is just a few weeks after a huge earthquake, huge for Yellowstone, hit the area, 4.8 magnitude. And you've probably heard the talk about what's going on in Yellowstone, because its potential is game-changing. They say that if the supervolcano underneath Yellowstone were to erupt, an estimated 87,000 people would be killed immediately, and 2/3 of the United States would become uninhabitable. That's a very huge staggering statistic. And we've been covering some of these volcanoes here. The Hawaii volcano back in the news with a lava bomb that just injured at least 20 people on a boat, and that eruption continues. But this is one of those natural phenomenons that can certainly change your world overnight. We saw an eruption in Guatemala, that turned a village into Pompeii immediately. The village is frozen in time after a pyroclastic cloud similar to this one came streaming into the village and turned everything into dust, turned everybody into a clay statue, if you will. And so this phenomenon is rather remarkable. This sudden closure of Yellowstone with this discovery of a 100-foot fissure is rather remarkable, to say the least. And immediately when we saw this story, we were thinking of the movie, telling what exactly is going on over there. And in the case where this thing was about to explode, the last thing they would do is tell people, because the statistics are clear. 87,000 people would be immediately killed, and 2/3 of the United States would become uninhabitable. Where would people go? What would people do? It would be mass panic. And so if you can suspect anything in these types of situations, is that the media is not going to be forthcoming. And we almost need to get some drone footage of this fissure. We almost need to get people on site. If anybody's near the Wyoming, Montana area, and you want to go up to Yellowstone, perhaps you can discover things by drone that other people aren't able to see. And this made the headlines yesterday, but it's still a developing story because there's still no footage of this 100-foot fissure that has opened up. But the potentials are huge. When fissures usually occur, there's something major happening, to say the least. And if it looks anything like this, people should be concerned, because how close is the end really? If this thing blows, it'll be the end of the United States as we know it. And one of the things that we've been following with these stories in Hawaii or the fires in California is that usually these things occur with reason, with purpose. And in California, we've seen the state turn into Sodom and Gomorrah. In Hawaii, they're still worshiping the volcano. And wherever people are basically led away, they stray away, we end up seeing Sodom and Gomorrah type events. And the California thing is ongoing. It's hell on earth 24/7 over there. And it's not just these wildfires, it's these hundreds of thousands of people roaming the streets, homeless, addicted to drugs. They've become zombies. They're victims of this open border policy, which has enabled the drugs and the gangs to take over in America. But where you're seeing this type of activity, fissures opening up, that's usually a sign that something else is going on. And just a few weeks ago, there was a massive earthquake in Yellowstone. There's been quake storms around there. It's been in the news relentlessly, and the potential is huge here. And of course, they're saying that nearly 70,000 people would be killed, or 87,000 people would be killed immediately, and 2/3 of the United States would become uninhabitable. Now, if our country was to get wiped out by a natural disaster, the insurance companies would call that an act of God, ladies and gentlemen. And, that's what we're seeing in these other places that are heavily into the dark side, like California, like Hawaii. And they're being hit by the wrath, it looks like. And so, what would be the determining factor that tips this supervolcano into an active state? Undoubtedly, it would be the moral standing or the situation ethically in our country. And of course, people that have been looking at our country progress from the happy days, from the Leave It to Beaver days, to whatever it is today, have noticed the change, and it's certainly not for the better. And if it continues, then we can certainly expect to see a monumental supervolcano type of event, undoubtedly, ladies and gentlemen. And perhaps this rumbling in Yellowstone is a warning to us all. Shape up or ship out, ladies and gentlemen. And maybe this is a wonderful opportunity to speak about what's really happening in our country, what has kicked off this social engineering that we're seeing that is basically pushing our country further and further down the rabbit hole, further down into left field, if you will. They are sending in the gender dysphoric, the mentally ill, into the preschools, into the elementary schools, to push, sexualization, to push transgender, Sodom and Gomorrah type of ideologies. And it doesn't get any worse than that. And it's being facilitated in every public school and every public library across the country. And if they're able to sexualize or transsexualize all of our children and doom an entire generation, then there is no future for America, and the supervolcano might as well go off. We're also seeing a huge rise of communism in America, and not only are people on the streets waving the communist flag, going after people that are waving the American flag. You see these Antifa going after the patriots and the Christians, but you're seeing the media push a very anti-Christian spin to their news and movies and music as well. And you even have deep state figures like Brennan, an admitted communist. This has been fact-checked, verified, well known that we've got members of the deep state that have sold their souls to the devil and would push ideologies like communism or socialism. You're seeing a huge rise in communism and socialism, deep left, deep Sodom and Gomorrah, deep state ideologies upon the American people. And this is just begging for disaster, ladies and gentlemen. And the more they push their deep left, deep state agenda, the worse things are going to get in our country. And we're already seeing epidemic-like events occur across the country, whether it be this perpetual hell on earth of California, burning non-stop, with zombies roaming the streets non-stop. We've also got an epic drug crisis in America like never before. It's not just hitting the lower class. It seems like every class is affected. Every city, every town in America is affected. You're seeing, normal people, with kids in the back seat hunched over, high on opioids, fentanyl, and the like. And it seems like the statistics are clear about the scale of this crisis. Nearly 1 in 2 people are active drug users in America. And, you know, it could all stop by securing this border. You know, cutting out the supply. You know, cutting the supply lines, we should say. And until, you know, these deep left communist socialist activists are neutralized, until the threat has been quarantined and stabilized, our country is going to continue to downward spiral into, you know, heathenistic, zombie-like proportions. And I think it's fair to say that there's a crisis of morality in our country, and the root of the problem is this progressive Marxist communist ideology that is being pushed in public schools and on the television via networks like CNN, NBC, and the like. And if we're going to stop these people, we're going to stop them by calling them out for what they are, and not self-censoring because we're worried if, you know, if they might be offended, or if, you know, their feelings might be hurt. The First Amendment doesn't talk about feelings. It doesn't talk about if you're offended. It just talks about free speech, and that's something that is becoming more and more rare these days, especially on these Sodom and Gomorrah controlled socialist media platforms. It's becoming impossible to talk about conservative ideologies without it being throttled or censored or downranked or whatever they call it. But it is censorship. And, you know, we see this time and time again. We have nearly 1 million subscribers, but only a small fraction will actually see the content due to the censorship. Makes you wonder why they even offer a subscribe button. It's the typical socialist communist ploy. They'll tell you what you want to hear, show you what you want to see, but they always fail to deliver. They always fail to deliver right now, ladies and gentlemen. Except when it comes to delivering their lies and their propaganda. I think people should be very aware of the current situation in terms of lies and propaganda. You're hearing a recurrent theme out there in the mainstream media talking about Russia, Russia, Russia. You have these people that are waving the communist flag, waving socialist flags or ideologies in your face, telling you in America that you should be afraid of the Russians. In these types of situations, proximity is key. These enemies of the state are domestic. They're within our borders. They have infiltrated and are now controlling many aspects of our society. And they're telling us to look the other way. They're telling us to beware of the boogeyman halfway around the world so that you don't pay attention to them. And we knew that this situation with their mainstream media propaganda was a farce from the get-go because it was used to distract attention away from the real issue. From the crimes that were exposed by the WikiLeaks, the Podesta emails, the DNC emails, and the like. And it's basically like you're seeing a bank robbery, you call 911, and the cops come and arrest you for calling 911, and they let the criminals go. That's basically what they're doing right now on the mainstream media. And you want to know why our country is going to shit? It's because of networks like CNN, NBC, it's because of places like Hollywood, and it's because of politicians on the left as well as the right. You know, remember those elections where it was Skull and Bones versus Skull and Bones? One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. Both were cousins, both were of the same cult of death. Bohemian Grove, spirit cooking, these are terms you should be familiar with. They are, you know, part of the legion of the devil, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want to know why our country is turning sour, if you will, it's because of these people on the left. It's because of these cult members that have occupied our country since 1776. That's not just our birth date, that's the birth date of the Illuminati, and this pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, That's their symbol. They're telling you who runs the country. It's right there on the money. And while, you know, you might have some skeptics out there, they're like, oh, sure, tell me another one. Tell me how big the fish was that you caught just the other day. This is literally our history. And while ignorance might be bliss, ignorance is also stupidity. And if you can be stupid if you want to, but that doesn't mean that you have to be over here. We've got the best audience, we've got the best crowd by far, and everybody knows it. You'd be surprised who tunes into little old stranger than fiction news. But that's besides the point, ladies and gentlemen. We're really talking about what's obvious, and it's so obvious we're the only ones talking about it. Which, that's a head scratcher. Why are we the only ones out there in the media talking about the epic struggle of good versus evil? Where were these people during their Sunday school classes? What, they didn't pay attention? They never got beyond the four walls and the television screen. They never got beyond the matrix. They stayed plugged in. They never took that red pill. They never followed that white rabbit. Must be. It's surprising what people will believe after watching the television. They'll believe the official story each and every time. And that is the problem. A total lack of critical thinking. Remember that story of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Is there any debate about the fact that we got screwed into going into Iraq? We were all watching, you know, the invasion on Fox News, eating the popcorn. Go get those terrorist bastards. And then it turns out they had nothing to do with 9/11. They had no weapons of mass destruction. They went in there for the oil. And they didn't even get the oil. We still got $3 a gallon gas in most places. We fracked the hell out of our country, poisoned the water, you know, gassed the people. And what did we get? We still got the same gas prices that we had, like, you know, before the war. We didn't get nothing. I still remember when gas was 90 cents in the 90s. Then they went to war and the prices never came back. The new normal. Just like the post 9/11 world, the new normal. Just like men being like women and women being like men, that's the new normal. Corrupt politicians, the new normal. Having a mainstream media that constantly lies to you, it's the new normal. It's the inversion of good and evil. Bad is good and good is bad. Man is woman and woman is man. A slave is free, and a free person has become a slave. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. You live in the land of liberty. You think that you're free, but you're only free to do as they tell you. That sounds cliche, doesn't it? Everywhere you go, there's places that you can't go. I mean, you might be able to go to the shopping mall, but say you go into a big city, you go to downtown, you're like, oh wow, look at all these skyscrapers. Wow, you know, it's beautiful. Look how rich and well off we are. Yeah, we can't go there. You go in, security will escort you out. You think you're free to say what you want, and then you find out you've been censored, throttled, put on a red list, and the like. And it's only going to get worse, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just joining us, big breaking story out of Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone declares a state of emergency as a 100-foot fissure sparks an urgent park closure. And this is only about 3 weeks after a massive earthquake has hit the Yellowstone National Park area, a 4.8 on the Richter scale, huge for them. A major sign of volcanic activity. And it's only a matter of time before this thing blows. And the USGS estimates that 87,000 people will be killed immediately. And that 2/3 of the United States would become uninhabitable. This supervolcano at Yellowstone has the potential of devastating the entire continent. And it'll make Mount St. Helens look like a 4th of July spectacle. Now, we were going to bring out some simulations or perhaps visuals from the movie 2012, but this news from Yellowstone is rather suspicious because there is no footage of the fissure. All we have is notice of an evacuation, of a permanent closure of certain areas of Yellowstone. And it makes you think of, that scene in 2012 when they first come upon, this lake that used to be there but no longer is. And all of a sudden there's, all sorts of equipment there trying to figure out what's going on, military helicopters flying overhead. The whole place was locked down, media blackout and the like. And that's basically the current situation that we got going on right now in Yellowstone. No confirmation of what is actually going on over there, except that it's a total media blackout. The park has been closed. Tourists can no longer go there. And the report is of a 100-foot fissure, but it could be 10 times worse than that. And compounding this recent news is the reports of a massive earthquake in Yellowstone just a few weeks ago. And this is really, making people edgy, if you will, especially if you live in that area. You're wondering, is this thing going to blow? Are you going to be one of these 87,000 people that are eliminated instantly? But there would be no escaping the ash cloud, no escaping the impact of this massive supervolcano that would, make 2/3 of the country uninhabitable. What would be left? The West Coast and the East Coast. It would completely decimate the heartland. The heartland full of conservatives and patriots, whereas the West and East Coast is full of sellouts, traitors, zombies, and Luciferian cult members, socialist, Marxist, communist scum. Communists in America. I can't even believe we're having this conversation, but there's no denying it, ladies and gentlemen. So wouldn't this just be the perfect little thing to occur? Now, we know that they've got tectonic weapons, satellite-based tectonic weapons. This was an HR 2977. We remember that correctly. The Space Weapons Act that they were trying to pass many years ago that clearly listed tectonic weapons as well as psychotronic weapons, ladies and gentlemen. That's a phenomenon that people should be aware of. Space-based psychotronic weapons. But tectonic weapons are definitely a thing. And so imagine that they could trigger the eruption of this supervolcano. Why would they do that? All of a sudden, the United States would become a super majority leftist state. All conservatives and patriots either killed or displaced. And this would be the perfect scenario. There would be nobody to blame. They could just say, oh, look, it was a natural disaster. I mean, that would be the perfect scenario. And the more I think about it, the more I'm sure that this is exactly what's on Dr. Evil's radar. There'd be nothing better than to trigger Yellowstone to wipe out the heartland, leaving only the West Coast and East Coast, the liberal states, left intact. This is something that we should be very concerned about, and I think that the more we talk about it, the better it is, so that members of the intelligence community and law enforcement at the federal level could perhaps, escalate this issue to wherever it needs to go. Be on the lookout for any unauthorized entries of these satellites housing tectonic weapons or the like, or perhaps even a nuclear mine. We know that in the Cold War, they were dead man fusing every state, every city with nuclear weapons. Other countries were doing it to every other country, and we were doing it to ourselves in case of an invasion. So it would be easy to plant a nuclear mine somewhere in some vulnerable spot in this supervolcano to uncork, the pressure and to cause a massive eruption, a massive explosion. That's exactly what happened during Mount St. Helens. There was a landslide that basically uncorked the volcano, and everything just came out like a bottle of champagne. Boom. And so with a well-placed nuclear mine, nobody would be able to really see the explosion. If it was under a megaton, most people would be too far away, and people that would see it would be, killed in the aftermath. And they could just say, "Oh, look, it erupted, and all of the red states are gone." They'd be crying on CNN, wouldn't they? They'd be crying on NBC. "Oh, the heartland has been devastated. Hundreds of thousands killed. Everybody must leave and go to California or New York with nothing, so that they can join the homeless masses over there." Wouldn't that be an interesting situation? I think that's exactly what this situation could become. And if it's not that, it definitely has the potential of being the centerpiece of some sort of, well, let's just say reckoning, or something to that effect. We've seen what's happening in California with these perpetual fires, with this transition from paradise to hell on earth. We saw the same thing in Hawaii with this volcano. The natives out there are still worshiping the volcano, and this thing is just non-stop spewing out toxic gas, turning the environment into hell on earth. People have lost everything out there, and so on and so forth. So this supervolcano could be triggered for other reasons, but I think it's going to be a source of concern for many people, as it has for quite some time. We're going to be bringing in our guest, Danny Ray, and we've got the whole crew coming in today. Yosef, Jada Truther, hopefully. And we're going to expand on these ideas, as well as cover current events. If you're just joining us, Yellowstone declares a state of emergency as a 100-foot fissure sparks an urgent park closure. It's a total media blackout. People have not been allowed near the area, so we don't know exactly the extent of this latest development. You would think that the USGS would, provide some sort of image, but they didn't even want to provide something photoshopped, which really makes you wonder, how bad is it out there in Yellowstone. We've got Danny Ray on the line live. And what are you thinking about this Yellowstone park closure? What could it be?
Well, we know that this volcano hasn't erupted in quite a long time. I think it's been over 600,000 years. And so, we hear scientists all the time going back and forth on whether it's due to erupt or not. And it seems as if nobody really knows. But this it is definitely something that we need to keep a really close eye on, considering how long it's been since it has erupted, and the magnitude of an eruption would wipe out a really large part of our country. I mean, the breadbasket itself would be depleted as far as the ash cover and stuff like that. But they've shut down 2 different parks, Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point, are now closed to tourists due to the possible safety hazard, and that's pretty much all that they've put out there as far as I can find on it. But they're trying to keep daily measurements on it as far as I can see, and I think it is definitely something we need to keep an eye on. I don't think that they would let anybody know. This would be perfect for their plan as far as Agenda 21 or Agenda 30 is now what the UN is calling it, their depopulation program. This would go right along with exactly what they want to occur. The faster that they can get rid of people, the better. So it's definitely something we all need to keep an eye on, and make sure to warn people who are over there, because This isn't Mother Nature is something that we can't really mess around with. We've seen here lately how many volcanoes have been going off. It's one of those things that we really need to keep a really close eye on.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're having a little technical difficulty with Danny's line over there. We've got Yosef from MN Global broadcasting from the Holy Land, believe it or not, to kind of come in and tell us what you think might be happening out there in Yellowstone. They've declared a state of emergency. A massive 100-foot fissure has sparked an urgent park closing over there. Tourists are no longer able to come in. There's a total media blackout. No information, no images. Could this be the start of something big? And could this have some sort of implications in terms of, metaphysics? Could this, be something else that's about to happen?
Well, thank you, Ron, for having me on the show. As usual, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And regarding Yellowstone, I almost forgot, but I'm thinking that it's a good thing that we have President Trump, which hates the media as much as we do. He just got back from Russia and he wants to go there again to finish up a few things. It's very important that the nuclear power, superpowers of the world, the nuclear superpowers of the world, get along with each other for the betterment of the entire planet. So I think that's a good thing. And Democrats hate the president so much that they're just focusing on the negativity and things like that. But we'll put that for a different time. Regarding the volcano, I think that the president should be the one to tell us what's happening. Hopefully he will, he has clearance, I'm sure, to a lot of this information. And hopefully he will do the right thing and notify the American people how to be careful and how to go about this in a manner that will protect them. Of course, you were just reading us the statistics earlier. It could be very disastrous if things go wrong, and of course I think the president should have the loss of life as one of the important things that should be on the agenda of making sure that as many people are saved from such a disaster, especially with the numbers that you were quoting before and the amount of land that will become uninhabitable. So I know that the media won't talk, but I hope the president will be able to address this issue as soon as he has enough information that's relevant on the topic. And of course, I'm just going to mention it once again because it's relevant to what's happening now. Collusion, did you collude? And get on his nerves, then you should know that the reason the president didn't do that is for our safety and protection. We're supposed to rely on our Secret Service, which is the FBI, CIA, whatever, for that kind of information. And of course, they were way too busy like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page cheating on each other's spouses to actually take the investigation seriously. And now we're left with a bunch of clowns in the FBI which are not getting anywhere, not on the Russia collusion situation and not on the Hillary indictments, which is completely ridiculous. And I think the Democrats kind of are starting to realize, at least the ones in Congress are starting to realize how ridiculous this is. But for the sake of continuing to be Democrats, they're just kind of slowing down the Republican advance of logic and common sense when it comes to the investigation. That's why they were just trying to disturb as much as possible the Republicans from talking and things like that. But they obviously had no point. Everyone was like laughing at Peter Strzok making a complete fool of himself, pretending that he's not biased and so on. But getting back to the point here, if Yellowstone is to blow, of course this is something that the American population should know about, and I am relying on the good people in the military and in all the branches in the government, especially the ones that are happy to have Trump as their president. And I'm also relying on the president to inform us as much as possible. This is something that in Obama's era I would really not know what to do in such a situation, because you will never have any hope of knowing what's happening, and your agenda will be in the hands of people above you. Back to you, Ron.
Well, I think that ultimately the people over near Yellowstone, it's our responsibility to make sure that we warn people of what could be coming. These fissures, they might not be exactly like what we're looking at over in Hawaii, but we are definitely looking at a time frame here as far as when the last time Yellowstone has erupted. It's been quite a long time, and we've heard in the past conflicting stories. Some scientists say there's no way that it can erupt. We still have, hundreds of thousands of years. Some say that we're past time for it to explode. But with any kind of activity like this, especially with how much activity that we've had in the recent history, with Guatemala, down in Hawaii, of course, you've seen multiple volcanoes all around the Ring of Fire, and this chain, it could definitely spark something in Yellowstone, and we want to stay on top of things like this and be sure to warn those who are close to it, because despite the fact that you're not going to hear tons of things on the news about it, you'll have to search or whatever, but they have shut down certain areas of the park in order to make sure that everyone stays safe. We don't want anyone to get hurt.
There's definitely an uptick in activity, and we're definitely overdue for a big one. We're also overdue for California getting hit. That's the heart of socialism and communism and Satanism in America. But their state is turning into hell on earth. There's hundreds of thousands of zombies roaming the streets aimlessly right now, and it's turning into hell on earth. You're seeing, nonstop fires, paradise lost, transitioning, no pun intended there, transitioning into hell on earth. And if you're just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, big breaking news: Yellowstone declares a state of emergency as a huge 100-foot fissure sparks an urgent park closure, according to authorities. And there's a complete media blackout. There's no images on the internet of this fissure, but people are not allowed to go anywhere near Yellowstone. And of course, this has been the subject of numerous documentaries for quite some time, because they know that this supervolcano, has the potential of killing an estimated 87,000 people immediately, according to the USGS, and it would transform 2/3 of the USA into uninhabitable territory. Now, if you'd imagine the area that would be affected most by this, it would be the heartland of America, where where it's predominantly Christian and patriotic and conservative. And so this would be the perfect cover story for eliminating all of the conservatives in America. They could trigger this supervolcano either with a nuclear mine or some sort of tectonic weapon. And they do have those. There was an HR bill, a House Resolution 2977, that talks specifically about space-based tectonic weapons that could trigger massive earthquakes. Geoengineering or weather, control is one thing, but they could actually do so much more, and it would just be the perfect Dr. Evil plan to trigger this supervolcano, wipe out all of the conservatives, call it a natural disaster, and then have America become a super state for socialists and communists. And this is something that everybody should be, thinking about, especially, given the strategy, the current strategy of the deep state of the far left in this country. They've been hell-bent, trying to trigger World War III for the past 4 or 5 years, trying to start some sort of nuclear war with the Russians. If you turn on the TV, chances are they're going to be talking about Russia. If you tune into a congressional hearing, it's Russia, Russia, Russia. They are hell-bent on world destruction, hell-bent on killing as many people as they can. They don't stop with the murder of children, with their abortion clinics and the like. They want to kill everybody. It's right there on the Georgia Guidestones. It's right there, with their eugenics programs. Our food is illegal in most other countries. They're now mandating, 100 vaccines for children. Everybody knows somebody with an autistic kid. Our water is being poisoned with fluoride. They're poisoning the air with all sorts of chemicals. If you've been researching, what's coming out of these industrial plants. If you've been looking at these super dump sites or Superfund sites, they're out to get as many people as they can. And the perfect plan here would be just this, massive eruption at Yellowstone. But when we heard the news of this and we saw that there was a media blackout, no footage, no coverage of this fissure, of the activities at Yellowstone, it made us think of the movie 2012, where they fell upon this lake in Yellowstone that was no longer a lake. Instead, there were geologists and scientists trying to figure out what's going on. Now, just a few weeks ago, there was a massive earthquake in Yellowstone, nearly 5.0 on the Richter scale, massive for Yellowstone, massive for the Midwest. And now they're discovering this huge fissure. There's a mysterious park closing, permanent park closing. People can't go into certain parts of Yellowstone right now because of this fissure. But more than likely, there are multiple fissures, and more than likely the situation is much worse than they say. And if they were to spark some sort of eruption by uncorking the volcano, it would devastate the United States of America, and it would make Mount St. Helens look like some sort of 4th of July finale. And it would be nothing compared to the devastation of the supervolcano. Now, if anybody remembers Mount St. Helens, the reason that thing erupted the way it did is because there was a massive mudslide that uncorked the volcano and let all the pressure out like a champagne bottle. And if this were to occur at Yellowstone, it would be devastating. USGS estimates 87,000 people would be killed immediately. Think of that in magnitudes of 9/11. 3,000 people in 9/11. This would be 3,000 times worse. Well, not quite, but 30 times worse. But in any case, it would be huge immediately, and then 2/3 of America would be uninhabitable according to the USGS, and that would be the heartland where all for the majority of the patriots and Christians are in our country, and that makes it. That makes this event even more dubious, even more suspicious, because this would be the perfect crime. They could uncork this volcano in Yellowstone and devastate the heartland and render the United States of America into a super socialist state, which is the plan anyways, and this would be an expedited way to reach that plan. Yosef, what do you think about that possibility? Do you think that they would go as far as induce a supervolcano eruption, a new type of Gladio B event, a new type of 9/11, and just say that it was a natural disaster? Could that happen?
I mean, that could be a possibility. I truly hope that Trump has ways of countering this kind of scenario, if it is in its development stages. Which brings to mind, when you were speaking, I just thought of the new military branch which Trump has begun, which is supposedly or supposed to be the outer space military branch. But I'm thinking maybe Trump wants to use to have a strong grip on this military branch in order to have as much control of it as possible and to use it to derail any of these kind of plans. Like when you said that the entire United States was kind of pre-nuked in the Cold War, just in case they want to blow a part of the country off the map if it becomes inhabited by communists. That just tells you as much as you need to know about the power and the magnitude of the government. We know in Jewish scripture, we know that if a king wants, he'll split a mountain in half and go down the middle. There's a famous story of a king that made a bet with a rabbi. He said, if you tell me how I'm going to get to the city, I'm going to take the right side or the left side. And the rabbi folded up a paper and said, your answer is inside. Open it when you get to the city. And when the king opened it up, it said a verse from Psalms, which basically says, Melech Peretz Geder, which means a king splits the fence, and it basically means that the king split the mountain right down the middle and went down the middle. So that just tells you about the amount of power that the government has, and of course in the wrong hands it could be a very big problem. Again, I'm very happy that Trump is our president. The walkaway movement is having a lot of traction, which basically means a lot of Democrats are seeing the flaws in the system in the Democratic Party and moving towards supporting Donald Trump. I mean, again, Donald Trump is not necessarily he just voted. He went in with the Republican ticket, but he might as well have went in with the Democratic ticket. It's a fight of good versus evil, as we say many times here on the show. So I'm thinking that maybe this 8th Legion of the military, I think it is the 8th group in the military, that Trump wants to control, hopefully will have enough cyber and technology advancements for the work that they're doing, and also in order to keep a tab on these kind of things and make sure that nobody is doing anything drastic to harm the human race in general and the people of the United States in particular. Back to you, Ron.
Well, anything's. Go ahead, Daddy Ray.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add the fracking aspect. Fracking is happening all over our country, and especially over there in the Northwest. It's something that we really need to keep control on. A lot of cities, a lot of communities have say-so. We have votes as far as it's concerned, and at least that's one aspect of this that we can control versus, the 5G towers that are going up everywhere. We don't have control over that. We can go and we can try our best at City Hall to try to take them down, but that's something that's over the state's head. It's something that, as far as the 5G is concerned, no one can really stop it right now. There's been a lot of people who have tried. I think that California is the only one that I've seen that's been able to slow down the rate of the 5G towers that are going up over there. But fracking is definitely something that we can stop, and that's my worst fear, is how much fracking is going on, and it just takes one bad drill, and it really could set it off. It's just like what we assume has gone on over there in Yellowstone, as far as them drilling down and trying to extract the water out of the volcano, or the steam. It was
in Hawaii. The
geothermal plant.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another aspect of another topic that we could cover, is that they could trigger this the supervolcano in Yellowstone with a fracking operation, just by increasing the pressure at certain spots and making that sucker blow. And as far as the Hawaii volcano was concerned, there was a lot of speculation that the geothermal plant had something to do with it, because it's like a massive fracking operation, but instead of extracting gas, they're extracting steam. They're pumping water at high pressures, which is increasing the volatility in that area, obviously. And this eruption in Hawaii is like nothing they've seen before. Fissures opening up in the backyards, fountains of lava. And we saw some of the lava streams earlier in this broadcast where it looks like it's going literally at 100 miles an hour, and we've covered that in our video archives. Be sure to check out our Hawaii volcano coverage. But as far as what's going on in Yellowstone right now, it's big breaking news. They've declared a state of emergency as a 100-foot fissure has sparked an urgent park closing. People are not allowed to go near this area in question, and it looks like there's a total media blackout. We got some news of it yesterday as far as the closure, as far as what they've discovered allegedly, but they haven't even dared to Photoshop an image of the fissure, of what has of what has occurred over there. We know that there's a massive earthquake just a few weeks ago, a 4.8 or 4.9 on the Richter scale, which is pretty massive for the upper Midwest, right in the same location. And these are all the hallmarks of an uptick in activity. And perhaps this is at first being induced by fracking operations to make it seem legitimate, like an eruption is about to hit, and then they'll let off a nuclear mine or some sort of tectonic weapon to uncork the volcano and release all the pressure to have it gush out like a champagne bottle. And that's essentially what happens in all of these volcanic eruptions. It's a change in pressure, kind of like when you open a can of soda or you open a champagne. The discovery of DNA is that DNA is information. It's a programming language. It programs for things like start and stop, and it's the most evolved program that humans have ever seen. And now they're looking to copy it in the sense of in literal sense as a computer program. And they want to store information. The Pentagon is now looking at how they can store information in DNA, state secrets, pass it along in a little vial or perhaps in a syringe. And it tells you something very important, that life on Earth was designed. And if you want to know how life was created, you got to start looking into Genesis 1, chapter 1. That's where the story begins. They're now discovering what people have been telling you for thousands of years. Science proves that life didn't just spontaneously generate here on Earth. It's part of a plan. And that's why we cover these events the way we do, in the context of good versus evil, because we can clearly see that evil is real, that evil exists in our country, it exists in our towns, in our cities, in our neighborhoods. It's real, and it's something that we have to contend with. And I challenge everybody to look into the law of biogenesis. Check out Intelligent Design. It'll revolutionize your perspective on life. And then you'll definitely want to walk away from these Luciferians, from these socialists and communists and Marxists that are pushing a cult of death down your throat and promoting an anti-Christian agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, never forget, it's an epic struggle of good versus evil out there. I appreciate everybody tuning into this broadcast. Be sure to like and share in the group, subscribe to our channel. Check out Danny Ray from Righteous Defiance. Check out Yosef from mnglobal.org, mnglobal.org. Check that out. He's broadcasting from the front lines at the Holy Land, and it's always interesting over there at MN Global. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Much love to everybody out there. And if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.